My name's Jeannie Rosner. Nice to meet you all. Nice to see you. I am the founder of Soul Food Salon. I'm a retired pediatric anesthesiologist where I practiced anesthesia for almost 20 years. And about 8 or 9 years ago, I started teaching health and wellness classes in our middle and high schools. And then I started Soul Food Salon. So this is the start of our 7th season or 7th year. And we've been doing this kind of monthly events. Essentially, that's the format. We do monthly events featuring different health and wellness experts. Historically, they were in person. Now we're doing them virtually. And my goal is to educate and empower us all to be healthier. So I do that through the events. We also have a health and wellness newsletter called Soulful Insights. And then I'm pretty active on social media. So if you don't follow me on social media, follow along. Everything is at Soul Food Salon, S-O-U-L, Food Salon. We have a website, soulfoodsalon.com, where everything that we've done in the past, in the last 6 years, is there. All of our past presentations are there. Our past PowerPoints are there. We've had chefs that have come and all their recipes are there. And so you can go there, soulfoodsalon.com, to access everything. Our health and wellness newsletter, Soulful Insights, all the past posts are there as well. So I update it regularly. So my social media, everything social media is at Soul Food Salon. So that's Instagram and Facebook. And then I have a YouTube channel where many of the presentations have been recorded and videotaped. Today's presentation is being recorded. And as soon as I get it, I will put it up on my YouTube channel, again, at Soul Food Salon. You could subscribe to all that and again, follow along with all of my stuff. My hope is to educate us all to be healthier. So also, I will send out an email tomorrow probably with the link to this video. And you can subscribe to that email list if you want, and that's my Soulful Insights email list, which is the kind of our master email list now, and that you can access through my website. Link should come up where you can enter your information. So every year I partner with a different nonprofit, and this year we are partnered with Off Their Plate. And Off Their Plate started in March when the world went into lockdown mode. And it was started by a third-year medical student at Harvard Medical School. She saw a need for the healthcare workers that were in her hospitals. The cafeterias had closed down and there was no food distribution. And then she saw the restaurants in our local area were closing and the restaurant workers were no longer going to be employed. So what she did was she partnered the two together and created Off Their Plate, initially in Boston, and now it's in 9 cities. And initially it was to help the healthcare workers get fed and the restaurant workers to be employed. And now in the different cities, it's also to help the at-need communities. So Soul Food Salon this year is partnering with Off Their Plate. And the hope is to help the Bay Area community, which is where both myself and Vivian are from, to help the at-need community and keep the restaurants employed as well. So a $100 donation provides 10 meals to an at-need people, and it provides 3 shift hours to the restaurant workers. To make a donation to Off Their Plate, you can go on my website, soulfoodsalon.com, and the main page, which is the About page in the middle, talks about Off Their Plate, and there's a video that you can see, and then there's a specific link that was made specifically for Soul Food Salon. If you want to donate, which would be fabulous, click that link to make the donation. I appreciate that. Our next event is on October 8th, and that's featuring Reshma Shah, MD, and Brenda Davis, who's a registered dietitian. And they are coming out with a cookbook, a book / with a little bit of cookbook in it called Nourish. And it's the salon's going to be titled Nourish, Helping Your Family Thrive with a Plant-Based Diet. So I will probably be sending out an email with that salon in the next day or so, where you can click to register. So a little bit of work before we get started. I just want, most of you I'm sure are familiar with Zoom at this point, but if you hover at the bottom of your Zoom box, there's a toolbar, and there's a Q&A function. So what we're going to do today is Vivian's going to do a presentation, And at the end, we will hopefully have time for as many questions that you might have for her. So put any questions that you might have in the Q&A box, and we will attend to those at the end of near the end of the salon. So today I have the pleasure of introducing Vivian Chen. She is an MD from the UK. She practiced internal medicine and family practice there. She has now moved to the Bay Area. She's been here for a little over 4 years. She has 2 children, and she'll share her story with us. But essentially, she and her family had some health issues, and she kind of struggled looking for the answers. And she's made some serious changes to her own life through nutrition and reducing toxins in her environment. And that's now her mission, is to educate all of us on that. So she has a website, platefulhealth.com, and she is extremely active on social media, mainly on Instagram and Facebook at plateful.health. So I actually met Vivian through Instagram. We started direct messaging each other, and that's where this all came to being. So Vivian's going to take it away with her presentation, and as I mentioned, at the end we will have time for Q&A.
That I am super passionate about, and something I wish I had learned earlier, and something I wish I had learned at medical school, because I would have been able to change the health trajectory of so many more patients. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and we'll dive in. So as Jeannie just explained, I am a UK MD, so I was trained in London, UCL, and I spent 15 years in clinical practice. I am UK board certified in both internal medicine and family practice. And 4 years ago, we moved over here. And you're going to hear a little bit about my story and why I have decided to focus more on lifestyle and environmental toxins now. I'm so grateful to Dr. Rosner, Jeannie, for hosting me on this platform, because my absolute passion is to get the word out and educate and help more people who otherwise wouldn't know the health impacts of lifestyle and toxin exposure. So a little bit of disclaimer here to start, and this is just pretty standard, that I'm not providing any medical advice, and to also always consult with your healthcare practitioner. I get asked a lot why I care so much about toxins. It's not something a lot of doctors talk about, and so I want to give you my why. So this was me in 2006. And to the world, I was healthy. I was holding down a very demanding job as a full-time medical doctor. And to them, I was high functioning. But really, deep down, I wasn't thriving at all. I had frequent migraines, for which I took Tylenol and ibuprofen almost every other day. I had insomnia, for which I relied on sleeping tablets. I had acne, mood swings. I was bloated all the time, and I had no energy. So to get through my day, I needed 2 to 3 cups of coffee. Now, as anyone suffering those symptoms would do, I went to see my doctor. They examined me, they ran labs, and everything came back normal. And so I was told I was normal, or I was just stressed out, I was busy, and just to carry on. And that's exactly what I did. I assumed that was normal and that everyone else was feeling all these things that I was feeling, and I just carried on. Until my life literally turned upside down. So this is my daughter. She was born in 2008. And very soon after she was born, she had feeding issues. So I was trying to breastfeed her. She wouldn't feed. She would come off the breast. She would arch her back and cry. We went back and forth to the doctor, and we saw several different doctors, including specialists, pediatrics, and she was diagnosed with reflux, put on medications for reflux, and when she didn't improve, they increased the dose and put her on more medications. And nothing improved, and she was actually eventually hospitalized because she became so dehydrated through not feeding. She had to be tube fed through an NG tube. And I don't think I would ever be able to get that image of her struggling as they passed that NG tube down through her throat into her stomach. And those of you who are moms, I think you'll be able to comprehend the amount of guilt I felt. And that was compounded by the fact that I am not just a mom, I'm also a doctor with years and years of training behind me. And I was not able to help my own daughter. And really, that was the turning point. That was when the light bulb went off, and I realized that medical school was great. It taught me how to be very rigorous in my analytical thinking and my approach to science, learning how to read scientific papers, learning about human physiology and all the various aspects that I needed to kind of learn in order to be a doctor. But it didn't give me all the tools, and there was something missing. So anyway, I think there's nothing more powerful than a mom who's guilt-ridden trying to help her own child. And so I dove myself into scientific literature and found a paper dated, I think, in the 1980s, basically describing all her symptoms, the feeding aversion, and it was attributed to cow's milk protein allergy. And at the time, I had a friend who whose mom is a very experienced pediatrician. So I spoke with her, and we decided to switch her from breastfeeding to a hypoallergenic formula designed for people with dairy allergy. And after 2 weeks, she was back to normal, feeding again. But I was left with a question, why? Why would she have food allergies, and to this extent? And why were no doctors able to help her, including me? And so I set on the steepest learning curve. I delved into nutrition, lifestyle, and that led me to how allergies may be connected with gut health, gut microbiome. And back 10 years ago, gut microbiome really wasn't talked about. And, you know, anyone of my conventional colleagues or friends I spoke to, they ridiculed me. But that didn't deter me, because I know I had read what was published in Science. This is all science-based. And so I went about changing all of our lifestyle very dramatically. It was definitely a journey, and I was very overwhelmed at first, very depressed, very angry at, you know, the state of our world. But luckily, things changed for the better. We all got healthier. She's grown out of her multiple food allergies, and I now am full of energy and thriving. So this is why I am so passionate about the topics that I'm going to talk to you about today, because it can really make a big difference, especially to those who are suffering and going to the doctors and being told there's nothing wrong with you and this is all normal. Now, I don't want to blame the doctors, because I'm one of those doctors, right? I also didn't know any of this information. There is a huge disconnect between what we know in science, what science has shown us and what's been published, and what's practiced in clinical medicine. There's a huge disconnect. And I think studies have shown that there's an average lag of about 17 years. And so I'm hoping by educating the public directly, I can help to bridge that gap somewhat. Now, this is not meant to overwhelm you, and I know it can come across very overwhelming, but sadly, toxins can affect our health on a very widespread level. And on the right, you can see a visual demonstration of just how many organs and systems can be affected by the everyday environmental toxins that we come across. And this is a diagram drawn by the European Environmental Agency and using data from the US National Toxicology Program. And that's just one toxin that we come across, the PFAS family, perfluoral alkyl substances, which probably best known as Teflon, but it's a very big family of different substances that find its way into our everyday life. But other than that, if we want to break it down, then toxins can affect our brain. So there's studies showing a link between heavy metals and pesticides with neurodegenerative conditions like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, lowered IQ in our children, and behavioral issues like ADHD. It can impact our immune system because these toxicants can stimulate our immune system and confuse it. And this is where the link is for my daughter. So all the toxins that were in my body that I was passing through to her and that she was exposed to, combined with her genetic predisposition to allergies and our lifestyle, meant that she developed food allergies. I think the most fundamental effect these toxins are having on our health is through endocrine disruption. And the list is really endless there on the compounds that have been found and published in literature associating these chemicals with disruption of our own hormones. Now, our hormones are a system in the body where organs and different systems can communicate with each other. So these are tiny chemical messengers floating in our blood, telling our organs what to do. And so an example would be the thyroid hormone, which controls our metabolism, our weight. The adrenal gland produces stress hormones, cortisol, which wakes us up in the morning and regulates our stress levels, gets us ready to fight or flight. And when these chemicals that can mimic our own hormones enter our body, they start to interfere with our own systems. And there's studies published on the association between various endocrine disruptors and things like type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, weight gain, thyroid issues, fertility problems, and so on and so forth. Now, before we even get to those diagnoses, though, our bodies are very clever, and our bodies will tell us something is wrong and out of whack. And these are the symptoms that I experienced: fatigue, brain fog, inability to lose weight. There's some people experience difficulty conceiving, behavioral issues in children, learning difficulties. None of these should ever be thought to be normal. These are all symptoms, signals given by our body that something is wrong, and we need to investigate and get down to the root cause of why. I'm definitely not saying that environmental toxins are the only reason we develop these symptoms, but it is definitely something that's very important that should be at the back of our minds. Now, the biggest pushback I get from my conventional colleagues is, but we have detox organs, right? So we don't need to worry about toxins. Our bodies will help us get rid of whatever toxins we come across. And to a certain extent, they're absolutely right. So our bodies have been designed with these organs like the liver, the kidneys to filter out and eliminate toxins. We poop out toxins from our gut, we breathe out toxins from our lungs, and we sweat out toxins. And so we are designed to encounter some toxins and still remain healthy. And that's one of the main messages that I want to convey if you're feeling overwhelmed, is that we don't need to live in the perfect 100% clean environment in order to be healthy. We just need to be at a stage where our bodies are not overwhelmed. And this is why. So if you look at that graph, it shows you the amount of chemicals produced and put out into our environment since World War II. And it's gone up more than tenfold. And so although we do have natural detox organs, we are able to eliminate these toxins, the amount we're encountering is simply overwhelming our bodies. And out of these chemicals, right now there's around 84,000 registered for use, and only a few hundred have been tested for safety. Meaning that we don't even know these things are safe. We don't know what these things are doing in our bodies. And the majority of these were grandfathered in via the Toxic Substances Act in 1976, meaning if they were already in use before 1976, they were immediately deemed safe to be used and continue to be used until it's proven to be unsafe through a study. So the onus is put on consumers to prove that something is harmful, where, in my opinion, the onus should be on manufacturers or the producers of these chemicals to prove that they're safe first before they're used. Now, the other thing I want to mention when it comes to detox is that we all have what I liken the detox pathway to is a funnel system. So we're pouring in the funnels at the top, and it's trickling through the funnel and hopefully eliminated very efficiently through the other end. And it's really only when that funnel is overwhelmed and we're pouring in too much and it's overspilling that we experience health issues and challenges. Now, we all have different outlets of that funnel too. So depending on our genetics, we can eliminate toxins and detoxify to varying abilities. And that's why not all of us are affected by toxins, and some of us may be more prone to them, and some of us, you know, we can eliminate a lot more than others. Now, the role of environmental toxins in health is pretty much under the radar until a doctor in the UK published a paper in 2002 where she correlated the amount of chemicals in production with the prevalence of diabetes and obesity. Now, the one thing that I've learned through all my years of practice is that health is a very complex issue, and it's never just one thing that causes a health problem. There's always an interaction between our genes, with our environment, and our lifestyle. And so, of course, this is not the full picture. If we superimposed the amount of sugar and processed foods we're consuming onto that graph, it would follow the graph exactly as well. So it's a combination of how we're living, so our lifestyle, what we're choosing to eat, and the amount of chemicals we're coming across. Now, one of the reasons why perhaps environmental toxins is always been under the radar is how it's studied in science. So as doctors, we're very, very good at identifying acute chemical poisoning. So if someone has mercury poisoning, we're very good at identifying their symptoms, running bloods, and treating them. And that's how traditionally toxicology is studied. We expose, usually in animal studies, the animal to a very high dose of a chemical we're studying, and we measure the effect. Now, the environmental toxins don't really fall onto that graph on the right because we're not exposed to these toxins at such a high level. And therefore, we're not going to see the effects straight away. Usually, the effects take a while to develop. And there's the thought that these toxins could actually interact at very low doses as well to give us unexpected side effects. And so we really need to be doing studies at the left-hand side of that graph where it's very, very low exposures. And so far, a lot of studies are looking at associations. So they're population studies associating certain exposures to outcomes. And that's where a lot of criticisms have come in from medical professionals and scientists saying we're not proving causation in these kind of studies. And although they're right, if there is any doubt in my mind that there could be an association or causation, I would rather take a precautionary measure and try to avoid these toxins until we have definitive evidence. So let's have a look at where these toxins are coming in. One of the ways these toxins enter us is through our food. And this is a graph showing various types of foods and the amount of persistent organic pollutants. So these are named persistent organic pollutants because they persist in our environment. They don't break down very easily. And so what happens is that they end up in our water supply, in our soil, and it's accumulated up the food chain. And so what you will notice is that the animal products are much heavier in these dioxins, and someone on a vegan diet, and as you'll see on the right hand side, has a relatively lower exposure to these POPs. And this is the point I want to kind of push home, is that what we release and produce into our environment, it eventually ends up in us. And so a lot of people ask me, well, how come we're exposed to all these toxins? Where are these toxins coming from? Like, why do we have lead and mercury and things like that in our soil and water? Well, it's because of what we've done to produce and manufacture over the last 70 years. So for example, when we burn coal, mercury is really released into the atmosphere. It comes down as precipitation into our ocean, our water supply, and it goes into the small fish, which then gets into the bigger fish. And as you go up the food chain, the amount of mercury actually increases in that food chain. And we are part of that food chain. So I want to go back to that slide and show you that this bar right here on the right, which is human milk. And sadly, human milk is now a source of these environmental toxins. And we need to be really careful if we want to protect the health of our next generations. And this is illustrated by a study done by EWG in 2004, where they took cord blood, so blood taken from the umbilical cord of 10 babies born, and they took it to be analyzed, and it found that there were a total of 287 chemicals. 180 of these caused cancer in human and animal studies, and 217 are toxic to the brain, the nervous system, and 208 cause birth defects or abnormal development. So by now, usually a lot of people, having heard my presentation, feels like this. And this is certainly how I felt when I first came across all this information. It's very depressing and it can feel really overwhelming. But I'm here to tell you that there's a reason why I teach this and I want to spread awareness. And that's the example of us, how we've managed to turn our health around by changing one thing at a time And it doesn't matter how small the change is, it can have transformational effects on our health. And so I want to urge you to just get on the journey and take it at your pace. We're all at different places. And, you know, a good example would be as something runs out, like a shampoo, to pick up and to, you know, look into a better product that you can replace it with. And so rather than this whole thing being overwhelming and you thinking that we need to change everything at once, let's be completely toxin free, it's actually not possible to be 100% toxin free, and our bodies don't need us to be 100% toxin free. As I mentioned earlier, we can still be healthy, exposed to a little bit of toxins here and there, but we just need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to reduce the amount going into that funnel. So I want to go through some key steps and important steps that I feel are big levers in removing toxins and getting our health back on track. And the first place I would start is with food, because we eat so much food and we eat it 3 times a day, sometimes more. And so we know that there are chemicals in our food like pesticides, fertilizers. The EWG has done a lot of work on this, and they've tested food for the amount of pesticide residue. And every year they publish their dirty dozen, which is the dozen of food that's highest in pesticide residue. And so for those, I've shown it on the picture on the right, try to buy those organic if you can. And a rule of thumb, if you don't remember all of these things, is if a food has a thick skin, so for example, a banana or avocado, it's probably pretty safe if you peel that and, you know, eat what's inside. Now, if you eat animal products, try to make sure it's organic, because as you saw earlier on that graph, animal products are a very efficient way of bioaccumulating these persistent organic pollutants. And if you eat fish, try to go for the low mercury fish. So there's an acronym for this, SMASH, which stands for sardines, mackerel, anchovy, salmon, and herring. Try to avoid farmed fish because these can be very high in dioxins and PCBs, and also factory farmed meat and animal products. And the other thing, apart from, you know, trying to avoid these things, is what to include. And if I want to encourage you to incorporate more fiber, because fiber binds to these toxins and reduce their absorption. Fiber also helps to encourage a healthy microbiome. And there's some evidence showing that the microbiome plays a role in breaking down these toxins in our gut before they can be absorbed. And a plant-based diet, and I'm so happy that the next Food Salon is going to be talking about this, because plants are where we get most of our antioxidants from, and these antioxidants can help our bodies detox and fight the damage from some of these toxins. And if you can't buy organic, and I totally understand, we are also not 100% organic. It's actually very difficult to be 100% organic. And if you can't buy organic, don't worry, because, you know, I know sometimes when you listen to these talks and you want to go on a journey, you start to worry when you see something that's not organic and stress out about what it might do to your body. And stress can also be a toxin in itself. So there are ways you can reduce these pesticide residue in produce that's not organic. You can peel it, and these are two ways that have been shown in studies to actually lower the amount of pesticide residue quite significantly. So one is a salt solution, a 10% salt solution. You can soak your vegetables in it for 15 minutes and then rinse. And the other one is a baking soda solution. And remember, our bodies don't need us to be perfect. We just need to take some of the load out of that funnel, and our bodies will thank us. So other than food, the next two big things I want to talk about, and perhaps not really at the forefront of people's mind, is the air and water, because these things are pretty invisible. Like, we don't learn about it so much, but we breathe 11,000 liters of air a day. And EPA has shown that indoor air can be 2 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air because of all the VOCs, off-gassing from our furniture, from cleaning products. And so the easiest way to clean out your indoor air is to open your windows and ventilate your house, other than, of course, when the outdoor air is smoky or polluted, like unfortunately we've been experiencing in the Bay Area and the West Coast. But under normal circumstances, you want to open your windows and air out the rooms. And when you come into the house from going out, take your shoes off, because shoes can pick up dust and these toxins and bring it into the house. And this study showing that dust can actually have many toxins attached to it. So things like phthalates, BPA, they can ride on the dust and be inhaled in entire body that way. So make sure you dust often. And if you can, invest in an air filter. And if you can't, then buy some indoor plants. These look really pretty, and studies from NASA has shown that they can also help to improve indoor air quality. Filtering water is actually very, very important, because I was under the assumption that if water is allowed in my faucet, that it's clean and it's being monitored. But unfortunately, the monitoring protocols were developed way before all these toxins were produced and invented. And so traditionally, municipal water is monitored for about 90 different environmental toxins. And there are so many more chemicals in use than that. And so studies have shown that municipal water can be contaminated with heavy metals, pesticides from runoff from farms, PFAS, which I mentioned earlier, and even prescription medications. So the best way to find out the quality of your water is by looking it up on EWG website, which I've gave you guys the link there. And so if you type in your zip code, it actually pulls up the quality of your water, and you can then pick out a filter that's best designed to remove the chemicals found in your water. I get asked a lot whether bottled water is better, and in my opinion, I don't think it's any better, because it's not really a regulated area, and most water is carried in plastic bottles, which can leach chemicals like phthalates. The other area that I moved on to after I cleaned out my food, air and water is looking at personal care products. So our skin is our largest organ, and it can absorb what we put on it. And on average, women use 12 products a day and are exposed to around 168 different chemicals. And so there's a very good website called the EWG Skin Deep database, which has analyzed lots of different products and rated them. And so if you go to the website, you can actually look up the names of the products that you're currently using and find out, how it sits. I try to stick to products that are rated green, which is 1 or 2 on their website. Anything above a 3, it can start to help cause health issues. Another really good app is Think Dirty, which is an app you can download onto your phones, and you can actually use it to scan barcodes, and it will pull up whether how the product is rated in terms of environmental toxins. And now there are companies like Naked Poppy, which is an AI system that tailors your skin type to clean beauty products which they've vetted, and they have in-house green chemists who vets these products. And there are many companies like this now on the market. So you can use a service like that to pick out better products for you and your family. So after I cleaned out my personal care products, we moved on to look at household cleaners. Studies have shown that cleaning products can be a really big source of indoor air pollution, because as we're cleaning, we're spraying these products into the air and we're breathing those in. And so at first I switched to using things like vinegar and water. There are actually so many different DIY recipes you can find online. But vinegar, water, baking soda can really do a great job at cleaning. But if you don't like the idea of making your own, there are brands that are cleaner, like Branch Basics, Molly Suds, Aunt Fanny's, which is found in Walmart and Target, which are produce cleaner cleaning products, which don't contain these endocrine disruptors. One big source of indoor air pollution also is candles. So traditional candles can put out things like toluene, benzenes when we burn them, and air fresheners. So if you can, try to use essential oils instead and diffusers. And there are non-toxic air fresheners on the market, like Grow Fragrance, that you can switch to if you don't like the idea of essential oils and diffusers. And in the kitchen, I mentioned PFAS earlier. So Teflon it can give off these chemicals that we then ingest when we are cooking these foods in the pans. So trying to switch out plastic and Teflon in your kitchen for things like cast iron pans, stainless steel pans, switch from plastic Tupperware to glass Tupperware. And instead of plastic bags, look for things like cloth or silicone food wraps. I like using stasher bags and cloth food bags, and you can also use wax wraps rather than saran wraps. Another big area is canned foods, because that can be a source of BPA. So trying to avoid canned foods and buying glass jarred foods instead, or cooking them fresh and freezing these yourself. So I hope that's been helpful for you and not being too overwhelming. I'm gonna take some questions now, but if you want to get more information, you can visit my website that I've put on there, and I've given Jeannie a link to my free guide to reducing toxins, which contains all of this information and steps that you can take to start to clear out that detox funnel. And if you want to follow me on Instagram or Facebook, I've put my handles there. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So wonderful and so informative. And I know that you and I have spoken, Vivian, and you alluded to this today, that this can be just overwhelming. And, you know, starting with like all of it at one time would just probably not be sustainable. So really starting with a baby step, one at a time, one change. I liked your suggestion, like if your shampoo runs out, maybe starting there or something. One thing that I have done recently, on my to-do list for the longest time, was to get a new air filter, air purifier. I think it was when the fires started last year here in California. And it stayed on my to-do list for a while, and I didn't research it, and then finally it came off my to-do list. And then the fires came again recently, and I saw your recommendation on the Air Doctor. So a couple questions that have come through are, do we need a lot of those air filters in all of our rooms? I think I read in one place that you had, when you cook, you bring your air filter or your Air Doctor into the kitchen. So maybe you can give us some suggestions on the use of a air filter, the air doctor perhaps, or just
Sure.
maybe go with that a little bit.
Yeah. So one thing I think people forget is that we have house air filters, right? The HVAC system. So it's important to get those replaced on a regular basis, and they have different ratings. So it's called a MERV rating, MERV, and you can see that number usually on the side of that air filter. And usually the higher the number, the better. But when that number is too high, it can affect the system. So you have to kind of decide what's the best number for your system in your house. And usually you have to, ask somebody who maintains your house for that. But something between 5 and 10 is usually good. And you want to be replacing that every 6 to 12 months. And then if you want to look at those portable air, and I forgot to mention, if you want to really invest, you can get air filters that sit at those filters and filter the whole house rather than buying portable air filters. But those systems are really expensive. It's kind of like $4,000 to $5,000. So for me, what I decided to do was buy a portable air filter. Now, there's so many different brands out there on the market, and you want to make sure that you're buying one that at least has a HEPA filter, and those filter particles down to 0.3 microns. But ideally, you want to filter down to way smaller than that, 0.03, because 0.3 is actually bigger than the smoke particles. So you're not really filtering out smoke that might be entering your house during wildfires, for example. The good brands out there on the market, Austin, IQ Air, and I chose the Air Doctor because it's more affordable. IQN and Austin, they have different, so each manufacturer, they have different specification on how big of an area it can cover. So follow the manufacturer's instructions on, how big the area should be, but usually in between rooms. So if there's like a doorway in between the rooms, it's not going to filter as well as like an open space. And one really important thing, if you're cooking, and we're all cooking a lot more now with the shutdown, is that cooking at home is great. Okay, we should all be doing that. But when you're cooking, especially high temperature cooking, that can generate PM 2.5 particles, which we can then inhale. And so we want to be definitely switching on the range cooker, the hoods, if you have those. If you don't have those, open the window when you're cooking. And if you can, just put the air filter in the kitchen, not right next to the stove, because the oil can, get stuck into the system, but you want to be putting in the kitchen while you're cooking.
Great. All right, a couple questions have come through for like your own. I know that you put out a lot on your Instagram and your kind of your own, in your stories, some of the personal products that you use. A couple questions have been like, what laundry products do you use in your home?
All right, yeah, so that's a great question. And something that's very important I forgot to mention in my presentation is that we've been conditioned and marketed to believe that smelling good equals clean, right? So many of my clients and people I speak to, they're like, oh no, but the natural products, they don't smell good. Like, I don't feel like my clothes are washed. But they are washed. Like, clothes are clean if they don't smell bad. That should be how it is, right? We shouldn't expect our clothes to smell like jasmine, or raspberries, and they definitely shouldn't be smelling like that for 3-4 days after you've washed your clothes, because if they do, it means that they contain phthalates, which is a very powerful endocrine disruptor. So that's the first thing to say, is we need to get out of that mindset that laundry should smell clean. But I know because of my husband, it's a very difficult concept to get over. And so when we first transitioned, I would put essential oils on those dryer balls in the dryer, so that can kind of make your clothes smell nice. But I personally use a brand called Branch Basics. So they're completely fragrance free, and that's why they're suitable for people with, hypersensitivity and allergies, because, it just doesn't smell of anything. And now we're used to it, but at first I would have to wash it and then do things like put essential oils on the dryer balls or spray with Grow Fragrance. So Grow Fragrance is a product I used when we were transitioning, to spray onto our clothes because it made the clothes smell nicer. But those smells, they never linger. So if you do use essential oils and the Grow Fragrance, you'll notice that the smell kind of disappears after a day or two. And that's actually normal. So yeah, so that's what I personally use. But there's so many clean brands out there now, and EWG is the database to search for options.
So EWG, just for those that might not know, that stands for the Environmental Working Group. You may have said it, just to be clear. So concerning essential oils, should we look only for organic oils? Is there a particular brand there? Do we need to be concerned about toxins in those? Absolutely,
yeah. Unfortunately, essential oils can be adulterated with synthetics. And, you know, if you're diffusing those and putting those into your environment, it's pretty much the same as using the more harsh chemicals. So look for brands that test their essential oils. Organic is obviously better, but I personally use doTERRA, but there are other great brands out there. You want to see that they've tested these essential oils and they can show you that it's pure and free from the contaminants like heavy metals and pesticides.
So along that line also, you know, we can go to the Environmental Working Group for some of this information. We can look up what you're doing and perhaps reach out to you for some advice. Do you have any other go-to places that we should be looking at as consumers? That we, you know, any databases that other than what you and the Environmental Working Group?
Yeah, so Environmental Working Group, Think Dirty, the app that I mentioned earlier. I'm trying to think, Made Safe is a new website that's just coming out, and they also work very hard to certify and look for, you know, these harmful ingredients in products. So there's not many products being certified right now, but there's more coming through. So I like them as well. Trying to think if there's any others for consumers. That's probably it. If I think of anything else, I'll mention it.
Okay. One of the questions from our audience was, do you have an opinion on ceramic non-stick pans for cooking?
Yeah, so they're kind of touted as green pans right now, right? But I don't think there's enough evidence to show that they're non-toxic yet. So I don't use them. I think it's one of those things that, you know, more research is needed to see, because, you know, we had that issue with BPA, right? So BPA-free bottles were then replaced with BPS, BPF, which are just as toxic. So, you know, I think time will tell.
So in your quest with being more clean for you and your family, what was the biggest change that you guys made that you felt like really propelled you guys in the right direction?
I think it really was changing our diet. I mean, mainly because my daughter had those food allergies. So I really had to work hard to remove foods that were inflammatory. So, you know, those foods that are inflammatory were causing immune responses in her on a daily basis and triggering off, you know, her immune system to react to all different things. And it also impacted on her sleep, her gut health, everything. So removing those and then introducing better foods that were more nourishing, I think it really made a difference. And for me personally, I had a lot of toxins in my body. So my insomnia, I can actually pinpoint it back to when the dentist drilled out a massive amalgam from my mouth and just replaced it with a new one without any protective equipment. And, you know, I know there's a lot of argument between ADA and dentists about whether amalgams are harmful, but, you know, there's studies showing that amalgams can evaporate inorganic mercury, and we know mercury is toxic to the brain. And I personally can speak from my experience that after I, you know, got the amalgams out safely and detoxed from mercury, my symptoms went away. And I now can sleep without sleeping tablets. It's like completely new to me, you know, like how do people sleep without sleeping tablets? But no, my mood is stable. I don't have to, like, my gut is not bloated anymore. So yeah, I think food is usually, definitely the first place I would start.
Okay. How about water filters? What do you guys personally use in your home?
So we use a reverse osmosis system, and I personally believe that that's the most robust way of removing all the contaminants in our water. Now, whether you need to use that really depends on the quality of your water. So that's why I encourage everyone to look up the quality of their water, because you may be okay with like a less vigorous water system, and I know those reverse osmosis systems can cost a lot, several $100. And so, you could do things like make sure you filter your water through the fridge and then filter it again using a pitcher filter. Like, there's different levels of removing toxins. We don't need to be 100% perfect with removing everything. We just need to be doing something.
So I was kind of thinking a little bit ahead, a couple questions. One, I know that you've traveled recently with your family, and do you, is that hard for you? Like, I mean, do you feel comfortable going into a hotel? Do you feel comfortable going into a restaurant? I mean, or you, like, how do you navigate that
You
environment?
mean in terms of like the contaminants or
Yeah, I just like, because you're so aware of everything that I could see like almost being like not wanting to go and eat at a restaurant somewhere because you know that they maybe didn't filter it with the right water or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah. And, I think that's a really great question, and something I see over and over again when people start their journeys, that they almost go the other way and become hyper aware and become stressed out. So this is why at several points during the presentation, I tried to put some reality in,
Right.
and that's that our bodies don't need to be perfect, right? So that funnel, the funnel is there. So before I go, I might make sure that I'm, not putting toxins into my body. I might not, drink so much alcohol and things like that to make sure my funnel is clear. And then when I'm out, things that I cannot control, I don't really stress about it too much, because then I trust that I have my detox organs to help me. I don't need to be 100% toxin free. So when I travel, I don't really worry about the toxins, because that's what my body is for, right? It's we can filter those things out. But I'm kind of like the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the time I try to do what I can, and 20% of the time I don't need to worry.
Great. How about the connection? People are wondering, the connection. You mentioned a little bit about toxins and possibly the microbiome. And what about with gluten? Seems as though many people are now gluten sensitive and intolerant. What's your take on that connection?
There's so many different schools of thought, and really nothing has been proven or validated in science as yet. So there's the thought that because we have manipulated the gluten so much, that when we absorb it, it's recognized as a foreign material by our body, and our immune system's rejecting it. There's also the school of thought that because they're so heavily sprayed with pesticides, we're tagging like a harmful chemical onto this gluten that our body's naturally seeing as something harmful and attacking it. I think that there's probably a bit of truth to all of these different things, and along with a disturbed microbiome, we have increased intestinal permeability, which is known as leaky gut. So food particles that normally would stay in our gut lumen and not appear in our bloodstream is now increasingly appearing in our bloodstream and being seen by the immune system. And so perhaps, before, when we had an intact gut barrier, these gluten particles would stay in the lumen and not be activating our immune system. So I think it's a little bit of everything, but there's definitely a lot more people with gluten sensitivity or even allergy, like celiac.
Okay, here's a question from somebody working in a hospital setting. They said, is there anything we can do if we work in an environment with plenty of toxins? They say, I work in a hospital. I'm forced to use hand sanitizer and soaps that are provided by the facility, feeling like I can control my home situation, but not my work environment so much.
That's a really good question. And, you know, if you're in a hospital, you do have to scrub your hands, or you have to follow protocols. And I fully understand that. So maybe it's kind of, again, looking at what we can't control. So those are things we have to do. And there's a little bit of letting go and just knowing that that's what we have to do. And our bodies can cope with that, provided what we do at home doesn't then add to that funnel. And, you know, so you can, if you're worried, then make sure you're including more of the foods that help our bodies detoxify. So I talked about fiber, making sure we drink enough water, you know, making sure you drink enough water at the workplace to flush out these toxins is one simple way. Getting out into nature when you're not in the hospital setting to reintroduce healthy microbiome back into our system, that's another really good way to counteract some of the damaging effects of exposure. So, you know, everything I've talked about to reduce exposure really would help. But then, you know, you want to add in, like, if it's microbiome you're particularly worried about, then, you know, things like fermented foods, and then breathing air from nature where it's like full of microbial diversity can really help.
So just going back on a few things that you touched on before, following up on your cavities, what would you suggest that they put in your mouth to fill the cavity?
So there's, I'm not a dentist, so I don't remember the name. I think they call it something like inert composites or something, but so there's different levels, right? So there's some, there's a class of dentists, they're called biological dentists. So they're the ones who kind of would say that mercury is toxic and they don't use mercury. Some of them actually would test you to see whether you suit these different types of composite and pick one that your body suits. So I would speak to the dentist to find out one that maybe best suits you. And the one thing I want to emphasize is that if you do have a amalgam filling, one is not to panic. Like, your body may be able to detoxify. I talked about the different outlets of that funnel. I just happen to have a very narrow funnel, so I detoxify very poorly. And so the things really just got on top of me. But I know plenty of people walking around with amalgams in their mouth that don't have issues. That's the first thing. The second thing is, don't just go to a dentist and just have it taken out without protection. These things have to be removed in a proper way, like with gowns, you know, rubber dams and filters that filter out the vapors, because I think most of it is actually breathed in. As they're drilling, you're breathing a lot of it in. So it might actually cause more harm if they're removed in an incorrect way.
Okay. How about, so it sounds like you're recommending that we get our nutrients with food, mostly plants, a lot of fiber, all helps with the microbiome, helps detoxify some of the toxins. Let's say I have two kids that are in college now and a kid that just moved off on his own to live in his own apartment. Let's say they're not getting the most balanced diet. They're not getting as many fruits and vegetables. Are there any supplements that you recommend? And if so, is there a brand that you encourage?
That's a really hard one, because, as you know, everyone needs different supplements, right? So, you know, if you're vegan, you're going to need B12 and the things that are different too, depending on what else you're eating. But generally, and you'd have to, you know, check with your doctor before you start supplementing, but things like NAC and acetylcysteine is a supplement that can boost the production of glutathione. So glutathione is the master antioxidant in our body. It kind of binds to the toxins and carry them out of our systems. And it's one of the main ways. So when we had the fires and the smoky air going on, I was teaching a lot about foods that boost glutathione, because it actually can help to mitigate some of the damage from smoke inhalation. And so NAC is a supplement that may help to boost that glutathione production. You know, if you really eat a very poor diet, then maybe a multivitamin might be a good idea, because you're looking, you know, there's just so many different minerals and vitamins that are involved in detoxification, like the B vitamins, selenium, magnesium, zinc. You know, a multi would include all of that.
Right.
So yeah, I think I would start there.
How about anything about blue light? Like, do you recommend using the blue light glasses?
Yes, definitely. So that's a kind of a separate issue to, and also, you know, it is connected to detox in a way, because we know that when we sleep, and during deep sleep especially, the lymphatic system in our brain shrinks to allow, actually, so the blood vessels in our brain shrinks to allow lymph to flow and detoxify from our brain. So deep sleep is very important for detoxification. And we know that blue light can inhibit melatonin production, and melatonin is needed for sleep and deep sleep. So I definitely recommend, I mean, I ideally would recommend getting off devices for 1.5 hours before bedtime. And I know it's not practical for a lot of people. So if you have to be on devices, try to get blue light blocking glasses.
Great. One other question, with the like the portable air filters, what do you suggest leaving them in one room or like in a hallway? Anything that you can?
I recommend having it in the room you are in. So if you're sleeping, have it in your bedroom. If you're in the living room, that's what I personally do. And the one I have is so easy to carry around, so I just move it in between different rooms.
Okay. How about, what types of milk do you recommend?
Is that like kind of non-dairy or just a general milk question?
No, this was what.
So like, so if we're talking dairy milk, so first thing to say is that dairy products can be a source of those toxins like the POP. And in fact, studies have shown cheese to be one of the highest sources of POPs like dioxins and PCB, which are endocrine disruptors and associated with type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance and weight gain. And so if you're drinking dairy, please make sure it's organic, but even organic, it's hard to get away from these POPs because they're in our soil, from, you know, the air and precipitation. You can't get rain to be free from toxins now. So the soil is contaminated, and from there that can get into the cows and then the milk and cheese. So I personally don't drink dairy. I also have a dairy allergy, dairy intolerance, not allergy. But mainly because my daughter, she was allergic to cow's milk. So we went, you know, we cut that out. So it was actually a forced break from dairy, but we actually felt so much better for it. So we just carried on. She has grown out of all allergies now, but we still don't do dairy.
Great. All right, I'm gonna add, this is the final question. We touched briefly on the ceramic pots. What pots and pans do you use in your home?
So I use a cast iron if I'm frying things, so stir frying. I use the cast iron pan, and if I'm stewing things, you know, things with more liquid, I use a pan. It's ceramic, but they've tested it for heavy metals and harmful chemicals. It's called Extrema cookware. And so that's a ceramic pan. It cooks really well. The only thing is, though, it sticks. So if you're, you know, frying things and you don't want things to stick, that's not great. So then I use my cast iron for that. Stainless steel is also a good option. So I have a couple of those. So I just rotate between those three for different purposes.
Great. This has been fabulous. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so happy that it's helpful, and you know, thank you so much for hosting me. I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and I hope that everybody goes and, you know, spreads this message far and wide.
Yep. So if you want to get on my email list, go to my website, soulfoodsalon.com. And then there's a little thing to go on the Soulful Insights. That's our health and wellness newsletter. That is the database that I'm going to send out this a link with this video. You can also go on YouTube probably tomorrow, Soul Food Salon, and find it. Follow at Soul Food Salon on Instagram and whatnot, and follow plateful.health on Instagram as well. And so this has been great. I hope you all learned a lot. I did. And here's to a better, cleaner world for all of us.
Yes. And thank you everybody for coming. Thank you for listening and your time.
Thanks. Be well, everyone.
Yes. Take care.